We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Wil Klusofsky, aka Wil Klu, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. Welcome back. I'm excited today. You and I both get to meet Jackie today. So Jackie, give you 20, 30 seconds to tell us who you are and why we care.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jackie McGuire. I am a kind of cybersecurity nerd by way of data science. So I became a data scientist before LLMs were a thing and got my first job for a SIM. But before my quarter life crisis, I spent 15 years in finance. So I'm also a recovered registered investment advisor and stockbroker. But yeah, now I have several jobs. So we could talk about those at the end if we have time.
No, that's awesome. Well, I love the getting the finance, had somebody who's spent most of my career in consulting. It's very much, as I understand it, like finance world. There's a lot of similarities and personality types that kind of exist in the finance world that exists sort of in my consulting day to day that I've noticed.
Yeah, I think I fit in well at first because I tried to, but then as I got older and figured out who I was like, once I covered myself in tattoos and started dyeing my hair, I was working for a venture capital bank, and they were like,
maybe you don't have to wear the Patagonia vests anymore and talk about
gingham, Brooks Brothers gingham collared shirt, Patagonia vest, shiny pointy shoes, and like old money haircut. I could never have any of those things, so it just wasn't going to work.
Pomade in the hair. Well, so I mean, this is super cool and interesting to me because I think you and I both share this passion about the psychology behind things.
Yeah.
I know I by no means, I have a friend who's a psychologist, so I live vicariously through him. I talk to him about my weird theories or when I want to understand the brain more than I do. But you kind of coming from that background and I think those of us who've had any marketing experience, et cetera, ever kind of understand there's some value in understanding psychology between that process. But then you've got data science and marketing and now cybersecurity. So I guess my initial question is kind of how did you find what was this path like? And then kind of why do all of these things work well together for you or just for anyone in general, right?
Yeah. So I think I would put money that everybody that ends up in psychology for any period of time is either trying to figure out why they're messed up or why their family was messed up, right?
100%.
You're never just like, oh, I'm super stable, I think I'll go into psychology, right? It's usually so everybody else had a terrible childhood. And I think my first year of I'm neurodiverse, autistic, ADHD, right? So first year of college was criminal justice at Johnson & Wales in Providence, Rhode Island. Then I went to University of New Hampshire for psychology because I got bored after a year. And I started working for an insurance company that did mental health and substance abuse benefits. And as soon as I saw how mental health and substance abuse worked in the real world with insurance companies, I was like, no way, I can't do this. I don't know how anybody does this. But I never really gave up that passion. So I got into finance accidentally trying to get out of that job. I applied for the wrong job at Fidelity, was almost homeless, living in my car for a couple weeks and didn't know what a mutual fund was. But I think that kind of, I had to kind of hyper learn. And like most women who are autistic, I am like a superpower masker. So I think psychology comes in because you try to mask in one situation and it works, but then in a different situation it doesn't. You're like, oh, they think I'm weird. I was trying to be normal. What is weird in
the
this
wrong
situation?
Person, right?
Yeah. And so I became a stockbroker in 2005, and it's a sales position, right? Registered investment advisor. It's all sales. And so that's 2005 is leading up to the financial crisis. Everybody's making crazy money in real estate. Everybody was so happy. And I happened to move into high net worth trading and then just happened to take a short stint in the fixed income desk when Bear Stearns went bankrupt. So I kind of got imploded with the financial crisis. And I draw a lot of parallels because the whole like malware, ransomware, nation state attack, all of those things that have been happening since just before and during the pandemic, it feels very similar to the way people felt during the financial crisis and
Mm.
after the financial crisis. So being new to security through data science, I'm trying to draw parallels and everything from like writing detections. So I wrote detections the way I would write fraud detection
Oh,
to psychology with like, how do you sell to people when they're really scared, when they don't know
mm.
what to do? So yeah, it's been, I think it helps a lot to come to meet customers at their level. And I don't always think people are aware that that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I've experienced that a lot where, and just understanding, like you said, the where the customers are coming from, and then new company or new rebranding, that kind of thing. They want to create this thing, and they just want to. One of the guests I had on before, we talked to quite a bit. She would joke and she would take pictures of. She would go to an event and take a picture of all the one-pager handouts and lay them on the table, and they were all white and blue with dark gradient, and it's like everybody looks the same.
Yeah.
You don't want. They're afraid to be an individual or have some of their, have their own identity. Or if they do, it's like, I mean, I can't blame. All my stuff's bright yellow, but like,
Yeah,
so
well, and I think those one pagers are also usually a manifesto of what a product manager or a product marketing manager thought was really cool about their product.
right.
And a lot of times that's because that's how they're being measured, right? So they're not being measured on achievable outcomes for customers. But when I walk into a booth and they hand me a paper that tells me what's really cool about their product, I'm like, these are all great. I can't even get all my timestamps in the same time zone. Like, are you kidding me right now? Like, no, people on the West Coast don't know what UTC is, and the guy in Chicago thinks it has to be central because that's where he is. Like, I'm not going to implement advanced AI to replace my tier one SOC analyst. Like, it's not going to happen.
That's interesting. Yeah, like this. Yeah, we almost always diverges into that. Like somebody finding solving the problem that doesn't need to be solved, because it's really good. And let's go back to the psychology of it too, because that's something I see regularly. Is that one pager or that startup that talks to me and says, "Hey, would you take a look?" And they're like, "Look at all the blinky lights and all the things we do." And I'm like, "What problem are you solving? Why
Yeah.
would I want to buy this? What do I get?" It's always it's my free consulting advice to everybody out there. Why would I want to buy it? What is it going to make, what's better for me as a person at the end of the day? Like, how do you communicate that?
Yeah. And, I think so. What often happens is everybody wants to be a platform now, right? So everybody's a
Mhm.
platform, which means they have multiple products and they want to solve everything for you. But when you tell somebody like my toe hurts and they hand you a Swiss Army knife, like, cool, what do I do with this? They're not like, hey, in this Swiss Army knife, pull this thing out and there's this set of tools. That's what you do first because that's the most important thing. And so coming out of, I've never talked to a CISO who was like, you know what, we are exactly where we're supposed to be, or maybe even ahead of the game. Like we're
Mm,
killing it. Every CISO is like, I feel like I'm so far behind. All we do is put out fires. I'm reacting to everything. And that's very similar to what CFOs I talked to when I was consulting for CFOs said after the financial crisis is like, most CFOs are expected to be all things money. Most of them
mhm.
are accountants or finance people. They know nothing about investments, about how your investment account's protected different than your bank account. So that's what I had to come in and do, but without talking to them like they were idiots, just being like, hey, you can't know everything. It's normal you don't know this. I'm going to give you like the top 5 things you really need to know as concepts and help you make an informed decision. And
Mhm.
that's really what CISOs are looking for is um, I like threes. So what I always tell people is when you're selling into the enterprise, you need to be prescriptive, i.e. tell
Mhm.
people exactly what to do, iterative, emphasize that as technology and the geopolitical environment rapidly change, you need to be ready to change too. And we have a couple other options and directional. Like this is what's moving you in the direction you
Mhm.
need to go. I think a lot of times vendors come in and they're like standing in Super Bowl was yesterday, standing in one end zone and they're like, you should be over there. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna sell you a training camp or a training program, not a camp, a training program. And if you do it, you'll get over there, right? Or like, you should be driving a sports car. They're like, dude, I've got monster truck tires on a Dodge Neon. I don't know how to drive a sports car. So
Right.
like, these are all the things. And it's like, you can't just walk into a customer and say, we solve all your problems because we have a platform. You have to say, this is how you assess what your most important problem is. And here's what we can do together. Like, you have to be an advisor, especially
Mm.
when people are scared or don't know what to do. And the psych piece of that is, when you make a reactive decision, even if it's the right decision, you have a negative association with it because you felt like you were forced to do it. So if you're a SaaS vendor, even if you're selling a CISO the right product to solve the right problem, if you haven't made them feel like they're making an informed
Yeah.
decision, they're going to feel bad about it. And they can't help it. So they may like you as a person. They may do business with you again because you're a person, but you want to create a positive experience, which you do by making them feel like they're making a proactive decision.
Right. I'll do what I do a lot, and I'll dumb that down for the salespeople and say, you need them to have thought of it on their own. Right. That's really what it comes down to. And it's not an ego thing, because I talk a lot about that too, about like, we're all egocentric people. And so we're very focused on ourselves, but it's not that. It's very much like you just said, if I don't feel like I came to the conclusion myself that I'm doing something somebody else has told me, I don't like it. I've been in that situation before. I've made that decision and been very happy with what I got out of it. And still there was something gnawing at me going, man, I really don't like this.
Yeah. I think sometimes people lose sight of how neurodivergent our whole industry
Oh,
skews. And most neurodivergent people are human lie detectors, so they can tell BS as soon, like within 3 words. And they hate being sold to, and they hate being
mm,
told what to do. So if you come to the table with, you should buy everything because we're the best company, the most, the greatest, they just stop listening because they're like, I know this is bullshit, and I'm not going to commit the mental energy to figuring out what part's true and what part's not because I don't
right.
trust you.
Yeah, there's that big distrust in salespeople, and it's funny because I the same thing even happens. Like, people walk up to my door, and I'm like, "Look, if I need something, I will go and do the research and talk to the thing, and then find the people I need. I'm never going to buy something because you were the guy that knocked on my door." Um, that, and it's again in the same situation like you mentioned. I do know a few CISOs, or have met and worked with some who are. I'm not going to say that they're like, we have everything under control, but like, they were happy with where they were. They had a plan. They knew what was going on, but it takes a lot to get there, including huge. I mean, these are like massive, huge companies, right? Or really small ones, because there's less to, it's easier to manage. But yeah, you look at, like, they have a plan and a roadmap, and just because you show up with, look at this new product, um, it doesn't matter how great it is, and you're going to
Yeah.
probably insult them and get them to just kind of close the door in your face. So
Yeah, and I guess instead of just saying what what you shouldn't do, so what the right thing to do looks like is, so I'll give an example. One of my jobs right now is I'm a research analyst, but I go beyond just like custom research because I'm really good at go to market stuff, right? So
mhm.
the first question I ask the companies that I'm dealing with is, tell me about your sales funnel. Tell me about where you have friction, where you don't understand
Mhm.
it, where you're doing really well. Because if it's top of funnel, that you need help with, that's a much different content and advertising
Mhm.
strategy than if it's mid funnel. So if you go to a CISO, you're like, I always ask, it's corny, but I ask the magic wand question. Like, if you had a magic wand and you could just make one problem disappear because it's the 80/20 thing that kills you every day, what would it be? And that's a really good way to get someone to start you down the road of, this is, and
This
then
is the
give them
problem.
options that include not buying the most possible from you, and give them, if you want to solve this problem, here's what that looks like, here's what that
Mhm.
cost is. If you want to solve the underlying issue that's causing this problem, that's a much bigger project. Here's what the first piece of that project looks like, and then we regroup and figure out how to move forward. So like, because if I feel like as a CISO, okay, I understand the problem, I understand the options, and here's where it really comes in, is that as a vendor, you more or less need to do sales enablement for whoever your sponsor to the finance team is. They are
Mhm.
probably not good salespeople. It's probably obvious to them why this purchase needs to be made, what the problem is, how it's impacting them, but they probably don't know how to tie that to overall enterprise goals, finance goals, risk management. So you really need to also understand what's the company's broader strategy and how do I help you fit this purchase, the budget, under that broader strategy and help the rest of the executive team also move their agendas forward with this purchase, because that's the only way you're going to get budget. Everybody thinks, security budget is unlimited, and that is true
No.
if you live in fantasy land, and
Right.
if you can continually tie security initiatives to sales initiatives, to GRC initiatives, all of that. Like, you can get budget from everybody for security projects, but you have to be a salesperson. That's just not what most CISOs do, right? Like, if it was, they would make more money.
I'm excited to hear you say that, because it gives me somebody else to like validate all the stuff that I've seen and talked about before, which is that whole thing. Like, one, from a sales training perspective, like, you need to enable that seller to be able to communicate, like, understand that, like I always talk about, you're selling to that person. Like, yes, the company is part of it. There's other like, there's more to it, but the person who's going to make the decision, or people, there may be a couple, they're going to buy it because of the relationship you have with them and the way you communicate with them. And that means you need to understand their goals, right? What gets this guy paid? What gets this girl her bonus? What happens to these people? How are they evaluated? And then, tie that to what's the business's goals, right? And I tell people the same thing, even when you build a security strategy, like, what's your business goal, and how do you break that down so that everybody can come to work every day knowing they're doing the right thing? And salespeople understanding that means you can communicate to them on that aspect of things. And I do, and I've said it a lot. I really wish I remember the CISO that told me this. He was a CISO, and he said, my job, he says, CISO stands for Chief Inside Sales Officer. I just go around to all the other groups and explain to them why we need to do this and why it's good, and and you hit the nail on the head with that. What content can you give them to help them? I've worked at places where we were like, hey, we'll put together a presentation for your CFO if you want, or to the board. Like, like, we understand what you need to get done. We're the security people, and I've got business people we'll bring in and have that conversation, right? Because you have to speak to them in their terms. There was some CISO, I read an article or something, and he's like, I never send an email that doesn't have financial numbers in it to anybody. Like, every single thing, it's like, whether it's cost per endpoint or desktop or whatever, he came up with some crazy thing, but like, it worked. Like, speak their language.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I've gone through the process internally at companies before, where you spend weeks scoping something and then it goes through the wrong mid-level manager who sanitizes your proposal, and so I think I hear the term analysis paralysis a lot within companies, which is essentially, from again, psych standpoint, a CISO would rather make no decision than the wrong decision. So they really need to be armed with data and dollars and cents data to show that they're making the right decision. And I think being aware of the fact that a lot of the risk that we're talking about is hypothetical or risk avoided, and that can be really hard to quantify. So you really need to start thinking about what that looks like. I recently published a blog called The Art of Risk Management, because there's only 3 ways to deal with risk. You avoid it by preventing it, you reduce it by catching it and stopping the fallout, or you transfer it, which usually looks like using a service provider or just insuring against it. And so if you start categorizing things that way and forcing your executive team to say, hey, if we're not going to do one of these 3 things, the 4th stop is acceptance. So we're all accepting we're taking this risk on. When HR wants to use AI, when sales wants to use ChatGPT in their own accounts, like, we need to accept that we're accepting risk for these things. So I think that's another piece, is figuring out how to speak your exec team's language when it comes to risk management and how they understand risk and how they understand managing it.
Yeah, that's head on. That's perfect. Like, I think about that all the time with, and like you said, within the context of sales, having those conversations, like, well, if you're not doing this, and honestly, this is something I steal from Josh Braun, but like, in that opening conversation, you don't assume they're doing the right or wrong. You ask what they're doing about this. And then if there's a common challenge, you say, oh, we see a lot of people dealing with, this and blah, 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 blah. How are you overcoming this problem? Have you, and then just shut up. right? And then they'll tell you, we've accepted it, we've thought it, or we didn't realize that was the case, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think in normalization is key. Letting them know, like, hey, I know you feel like you're behind. Virtually everybody I deal with is at this point, and you don't
right.
need to get to advanced. You just need to get to the next stage, so we can do that together. Like that
Right.
is one of the most powerful things you can tell a customer if you do it sincerely.
This has been awesome. I can talk to you for hours, and maybe we will again sometime. Where can everybody find you on the interwebs, should they have a desire to do so?
So my personal GeoCities looking website is jackie'sinsecurity.com. I'm big on LinkedIn, so LinkedIn/Jackie's Insecurity. I'm basically Jackie's Insecurity everywhere except
Smart branding.
the former bird we won't talk about.
Well, thanks, Jackie. It's been great chatting with you.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcast. If you'd like to engage, find Wil on LinkedIn at /WilKlu or visit at wilklu.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.